Mhm.
Yes, and I think it's time to start. So, welcome everyone. My name is Enrico Ronchi, and I am here hosting the webinar series of the Human Behaviour in Fires Permanent Group of the International Association for Fire Safety Science. Today, I'm very pleased to have a very good speaker, Dr. Angelika Kneidl that works with Accurate, and she will talk about verification and validation of evacuation models. But before we start with the presentation, I give you a bit tell you a bit about the structure of the webinar. So I will give a short introduction for a couple of minutes, and then Angelica will present for about 45 minutes so that we have the last 10-15 minutes for a Q&A. And when it comes to questions, you can also add them in the chat during the presentation, and we can take them at the end, or at the very end, we can also, give the word if someone wants to briefly do some questions. The only thing that, of course, ask to everyone is if we do this live to keep your questions brief so that we give the opportunity to as many people as possible to provide questions and comments. As you know, the Human Behaviour in Fires Permanent Group of IAFSS is coordinated by myself, which, as you know, I am in charge more on the webinar series that you're attending now. But I'm also together working with Erika Kuligowski that works at RMIT in Australia. I also always thank my PhD student Arthur Roert, that is the one making sure that all the things work behind the scenes for the webinars. And we are at our 14th event of our webinar series. So we have a lot of ongoing activities in the Human Behaviour in Fires domain. So you can actually join the permanent group. It is free. There is an opportunity to contribute to the different activities. Of course, reach out to me or Erica if you have an interest, or just you can sign up to be updated on when our next events and activities. So in the chat, I guess Arthur has put this up. You will have the opportunity to fill out a form to be kept updated. So one more thing that I want to advertise a bit is that after over 10 years, we are coming back with the Human Behaviour in Fire Symposium that will be next year here in Sweden. And this is jointly arranged by Lund University and University of Canterbury in New Zealand. And we are arranging here in Sweden, in Helsingborg, the place where my lab is. After over 10 years, this is an historical conference series that has been going on since the late 90s and has been paused with COVID. And now we are trying to revive it and have a nice opportunity for people to talk about topics linked to human behavior in fires, like evacuation, crowd management, and so on. So there is the link now in the chat, and if you want more information, they are there. And we will issue a call for submission sometime during the fall for the conference of next year in October. Of course, if you have any more questions on this, you're welcome to contact me. And now it's time for me to introduce the speaker. I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Angelika Kneidl, that is a recognized expert in crowd and evacuation simulations. She has a background in computer science and a PhD from the Technical University of Munich. I know she has been working with Gerta Koster there for some time. And she's the founder and managing director of Accurate, a company specializing in crowd simulation. And the core product is a crowd simulator, Crowdit, which is an agent-based software that is refined based on project needs and validated with the latest research in pedestrian dynamics. She has worked on over 80 simulation projects with different type, fire safety, large-scale events, transportation hubs, and so on, and is active in research and standardization. Most importantly, she is here because she is the first chair of the RiMEA Association, which is a very nice association that has been contributing on guidelines for testing evacuation simulations and crowd management applications of evacuation simulations. And when we were chatting about the idea to have a webinar, the topic of verification and validation has immediately caught my attention because this is a very important topic for everyone working with evacuation simulations. So I stop sharing now, and I leave the virtual floor to Angelika. So very welcome, and thanks again for joining us today. And yes, the floor is yours, and please share your slides.
Sure. Thank you very much, Enrico, for this nice introduction. So now my slides are visible, correct? Great. All right. So yeah, welcome to my talk about verification and validation of evacuation models. It's really a topic where I think it's very, very important. And I hope that by the end of the talk, you will be of the same opinion than I am. So let's see. So just some couple of words, but Enrico already told most of the stuff which is important about me. But maybe why I'm standing here. So I did my PhD thesis on actually wayfinding behavior of pedestrians. And during my PhD thesis, there was this love parade disaster in Germany, in Duisburg, where 21 people got killed because of overcrowding. And I was just doing my research on such things, on such models, and that it made me actually to say, okay, I don't want to get all my work put back into some papers and publications, but nobody uses it in real. And that's why I founded Accurate in 2014. And now, yeah, well, we are a company that is specialized on crowd simulations. And I think it's a very important thing to really, yeah, kind of be able to simulate the dynamics of crowds in order to, in the best case, save lives. And I don't know if anybody heard about this, but we have the Oktoberfest right now in Munich, and this is like the biggest, festival in of the world. And there was actually again some kind of critical situation last weekend. There were too many people on the actually area, and they had really problems to prevent overcrowding, and they closed the whole area, which is a huge area in the city center of Munich, and was kind of critical. Nothing happened, thank God. But you see that it's so important to model such things up front and to basically act from an organizational point as well, like that you really see, okay, now it starts to overcrowd and now we really have to close it. But yeah, well, there will be some aftermath. I think there's already lots of media and press in Munich that really are upset what happened at the Oktoberfest. Also, really nothing happened. But just to see that it's really actual, and even if nothing happens, it's kind of very close most of the time. So next to my kind of business side, I'm still very interested in research. That's why we are always doing research projects, and that's why I'm so engaged in seeing how can we model even better, to develop these models and to improve them. And that's why I'm the first chairperson of RiMEA, which is a very important, from my point of view, very important association. And I'm as well the working group leader of, this is a German association as well, HBiF, which is basically was founded after the Love Parade disaster. And now we have like a very, big, it's called EBC. It's kind of, it's recommendations for major events. And now there a working group formed which looks into the simulations for major events. When do they make sense? What can they kind of reveal upfront in the planning process? And I think it's very important to go forward with this. So just some words about Accurate. Well, our core business is the simulation software, and I personally are very, very interested that this software is always validated, because I think if it's not validated, then we do have a problem, because if we have any results and then something happens, I couldn't kind of forgive myself. So I think it's really so important to always get these models as best as possible validated. We do a lot of consulting with it, and the third pillar, more or less, is innovation, and that's why I'm here, because I think we really need to do more research. There's lots of stuff that we can research about us humans and about our behavior, and I think it's a very, very interesting topic. So about RiMEA, just a couple of words for those who don't know RiMEA yet. It's a German association, but I think what is really special about this association is that we have different groups, different stakeholders. So we do have the users of models, so really practitioners. we have the model developers, and we do have researchers, which helps us to kind of combine all these three pillars, which are important to develop such models further. And the idea is basically to have this guideline for microscopic evacuation analysis. And the first version was back in the early 2000s. And it is, consists of two parts. So the first part is really to describe how you would kind of conduct a simulation. How would you kind of document your results? How can you interpret the results and so on? And the second part where I want to focus today is that it consists now of 16 test cases for verification and validation, so that model user or modelers can have kind of all these tests being conducted, and then actually the applicant or the practitioner understands how the model would react to certain situations and how sensitive the model acts. The guideline is for free. It's available in the net. I just put you a barcode, and it's in German, English, and French. So we have even 3 languages here. All right. So what I want to talk about today is really, I want to focus on verification and validation. And first of all, I mean, I'm totally convinced that we need it, but why do we need it actually? I want to motivate this a little bit. Then I want to give a short overview about these verification and validation approaches, and then end with a use case by showing you how the new RiMEA test that we just recently released, so the English version is just online like for 1 month now, where we added 3 new tests, and I just showcased them with Crowded. All right. So why do we need verification and validation? And I just, actually, Enrico showed me this one publication of them where they asked or made a huge survey about their model users. And it's very interesting that you can see that the validation and verification is the most important thing when it comes to which model do I choose or which software do I choose for the simulation. And I think this is kind of not the main reason why it's important, but it's interesting, and I'm really happy about this result because it underlines how important it is, and that the practitioners understand that it's very important to use a model that is very well validated and verified. Basically, what is verification and what is validation? I mean, we always use these two terms, and let me start with verification. So when it comes to for software development, then you kind of say, okay, I have an algorithm, and then I need to test whether the algorithm, as I thought it is implemented correctly. So to do the things right. So if I, for example, implement a sum, then 1 + 1 equals 2, and the program needs to kind of implement the algorithm that there is always going to be 2 the outcome. So it tests basically whether the selected model is implemented correctly. So it forms the basis of everything. I mean, I'm honest, and I think in every software around the world there are bugs, and you can use tests to kind of minimize these bugs, or at least find the most important bugs that the model, let's put it like, mostly works or is implemented correctly. And only then the validation part kicks in. So then the second step is to do the right things. So what do I mean by that? So basically now I have an algorithm. For example, I love this shortest path algorithm. So I had implemented the Dijkstra algorithm, and it's correct, and it always gives me back the shortest path. But is it really the right algorithm for my problem? Does really every pedestrian steer along the shortest path? Well, I wouldn't say so, because we have some problems in estimating distances. So I don't think that every pedestrian would find the shortest path. So this is basically the validation part. Now I have a perfectly working algorithm, which is bug-free, but maybe it doesn't even model what the reality shows us. And this is why I think it's so important to have both verification and validation in order to understand how a model works and where the weaknesses and the strengths of a model lie. And I just hold a presentation at the PED in Prague this year because we had, like in RiMEA, we did a lecture hall study. We all call it the lecture hall study. It's like a lecture hall, as you can see it on the picture. And this lecture hall basically served for many years now in Germany as like a benchmark or a characteristic example to compare different evacuation models. And in total, 8 different models were used to model this, from my point of view, quite simple scenario. And yet, when we implemented and simulated the scenario, we got some interesting results. So we really defined it very precisely how the scenario should be modeled. So we see here one scenario where you can see all the seats here. Then here's kind of the lecturer. We have here 2 exits in the front and one, view, or the main exit to the back. And this was scenario 1, that everybody walks up the stairways here and then exits the lecture hall to the back. And the second scenario was using the 2 front exits. And we defined how many people should be in the lecture hall, so it was all well defined. And to kind of eliminate any difference in times, we said we only compare the movement time, so we don't set any pre-movement time. So it's only the movement time that we don't get any kind of difference in results because somebody used 30 seconds for pre-movement time and so on. So with this setup, very well defined, we had a well-defined DWG, we had a well-defined number of pedestrians, we had well-defined scenarios. We even got kind of very interesting and different results. So let me walk you through this chart. So basically what we did is we measured all the evacuation times the different models were giving. And then we had like a mean on all these different evacuation times, which is here 1. And then we see the deviation to the mean of the different models. And we tested 2 macroscopic models, and you see that they kind of, especially Brzezinski and Milinski, which is a hydraulic model, has a huge deviation in overestimating, let's put it like this, the time, whereas the microscopic models, so there's like continuous models like ASERI, Crowded, Pathfinder, and FDS evac, and we have cell-based model like Building, Exodus, and PETCO, and we see that these models are kind of deviating quite far away from the mean, and this was interesting, and we were like, okay, this is a very interesting finding. So we even need to understand more why these models kind of deviate so much. Plus, who can tell which model works best? I mean, there's just a mean between all these models, but nobody knows really what would have happened in reality. So we didn't test it with a real evacuation drill. So this is something what I want to do in the next, that we really get a lecture hall which is real and where we can basically then compare the models to real evacuation drills. So this is actually one motivation for validation. So we don't know which is best, we just see that they deviate. And maybe even the macroscopic Brzezinski and Milinski is correct and all other models are incorrect, for example. So we don't know. And this is why it's so important to get these verification and validation approaches. And if we look how this evolved over time, then it's not like that it's new, but it's been there for a while. As long as we have these models, we do have, for example, experiments and evacuation drills, because without experiments, we couldn't even develop our first models. So this is kind of the foundation of everything, of all the tests, of all the methods that have been developed. And the first kind of evacuation testing was done in the maritime organization. So the evacuation of ships, because I mean, there have been some catastrophes where many people died because of sinking ships. So very interestingly, they were the first to kind of say, okay, we need evacuation analysis of our ships. And you see the first kind of guideline was published in 2002. Then the RiMEA tests, we had the first release of the RiMEA test in 2004, and it's ongoing work. So we really had the latest version has just been published in September. where we define different evacuation tests, and we kind of use the IMO tests and put the application area to buildings and to fire safety engineering, and not only ships. Then in the States, we have the NIST technical note, which was published in 2013, which as well has several test cases where you can validate and verify your model. And all these kind of, were incorporated together in the ISO standard, which was published in 2020, and Enrico was kind of the group leading for that. And I really like the standard. I think it's a very good standard, which kind of, incorporates all the experiences or all these tests which have been developed in earlier days, and now kind of put a standard on that. And this is really like where we really have binding, or binding tests or binding tests that you need to conduct. So I just kind of try to compare these 4 different test guidelines or standards, and probably there's more in the world, so please excuse if I didn't scan the whole world for all standards, but I think these are kind of the most common ones. So what we can see, so I kind of stole the categorization from the ISO standard in these 5 different kind of, how the test cases are designed or what the purpose of the test cases are. And I try to map them to the other standards. And as you can see, in the beginning, there was only verification, basically. It was only verification tests of basic components. So for example, how the pre-movement time, can you implement a pre-movement time? Can you implement it with different distribution? Or very basic tests like, okay, can an agent maintain his velocity when he walks in a straight corridor? Or is he going to be accelerated and maybe jumps over a wall or whatever? Like with force-based models, this could happen if you don't calibrate them correctly. So you see, these are really basic tests. And I think they are very, very important. But this is kind of so, I mean, if you don't even pass these tests, then you should really go one step back and really work on your model before you simulate any real scenarios. Then there's a special fire-people interaction, which is only kind of in the NIST and in the ISO norm or standard. So we have like these, influencing of smoke or fire, like a reduced visibility, and then the impact on walking speed or the occupant incapacitation. Then there's, again, only in the NIST and in the ISO standard, the verification of building-specific components. So, for example, elevators or escalators. And then we have a bunch of tests, which are the verification of behavioral components. So, for example, is it possible to test group behaviors? Can you kind of group some agents to a group and they walk in a group? Or is the model capable of how people would choose the escape route and change their escape routes maybe even? Or then we have like 1 or 2 tests, which are only in RiMEA and IMO, which kind of is a large crowd leaving a public space, and so on. Then we have counterflow tests. Then here again, only in the NIST and in the ISO standard, like people with movement disabilities. And so you see that all these tests are basically, there's some kind of, differences in the test cases, but basically these different standards and guidelines try to build a similar portion of testing. And right now we are only in the verification part. So only does my model that what I programmed it. And then we have basically only very, very few validation tests. I mean, this is probably because it's very hard to define quite good validation tests, and you need the experiments in order to get a validation test. And if you see, the only kind of thing that we had like everywhere is these exit flow rates. So you know the bottlenecks experiments, there's plenty of experiments there. So you can use these. And what ISO standard did is really to put 10 extra tests for validation, which is great. But I know this because a student of Enrico tried to implement all these tests for crowded, or he didn't try, he did it. And there, I just posted here one example. And here you can see, if you read through it, it's not so easy for the one who wants to design or conduct the test to do so, because there is not like kind of a drawing and please draw it like this, and then, I don't know, put 100 people here and then let them walk over a stairwell and then measure the flow. But it's more or less, okay, we have a couple of experiments that we recommend that you can use, and then pick experiments, then try to or model the experiment as it was conducted. And then think of which results you can compare, for example, evacuation times, merging flow rates, or movement path, and then you should report it. And why is it like this? I mean, it's a standard, so you have to be careful what you write, and the more detailed you give instructions for the tester to conduct the test, the more you will maybe fail even to get the standard kind of agreed on, because there's maybe some models that are not able to model stairways. So this is something that you need in a standard. You always have like these compromise to do. Plus, what I realized is that some of these publications are not even publicly available, these data. So if you want to test, then you kind of first need to buy the publication in order to even be able to test it. So, and this was basically the motivation for us in RiMEA to say, we want to create new validation tests based on experiments where all the data are publicly available. And this is where we ended up with the first 3 new tests, which I want to show you a little bit more in detail now. So actually, thanks goes all to Mohsin Shahibi, who works at the Forschungszentrum Jülich. And I think most of you will know him. He led a working group of 8 people within RiMEA, and they started to design new tests with the following objectives. So we wanted to have tests that rely on open access to the underlying experimental data, so everybody can see all the data where they came from or the test case came from, that the tests are small enough to be conducted efficiently. And if I kind of put my head on as a business lady, then I say, yeah, I cannot kind of spend hours and days to design one test, but I need to make it very fast and repeatable. So this is something which is very important for the modelers to get kind of fast tests and to be clear what they need to do. So it's clear instructions for setting up the test, and yet the modeler has the freedom to account for specific model properties. So this was important as well, because we have a variety of models, different models. So we really wanted to kind of get the freedom, but I mean, our guideline, it's like microscopic models, so we only focus on microscopic and not macroscopic models. And last but not least, the test should not offer a simple yes or no answer, but the tester should evaluate, so that we get kind of from the results like a range where the model kind of ends up. And then it is important for the modeler to kind of write why is it like that, or to kind of let the practitioner who would use the model to understand why the model behaves in certain situations like that. So let me walk you through these new RiMEA tests, which we conducted with crowded, and maybe just one or some small details on crowded, that you have like an idea how crowded works. So basically, it's an individual agent-based model where people move through spaces. It's a continuous spatial resolution, so we are not cell-based, so every point in space is accessible. And each agent needs to have a destination somehow, which can be based, the choice of the destination, on different heuristics. And the goal of each agent is to reach this destination sometimes. And there's several points of interest that can be passed along the way. And each agent has individual properties like walking speed, personal space, or birthplace. And on the locomotion layer, it uses the optimal steps model, which was first developed by Gerta Köster and Michael Seitz. And it's not a social force model, and because I'm very convinced that the optimal steps model is just a very, very good model which kind of mimics the stepping behavior of pedestrians instead of only describing it by forces that kind of are forced, that the people are always somehow forced through the space, because I think that we have an own will and we can stop whenever we want, and there's not always forces kind of forcing me going somewhere. So you can find more info on our webpage. And now I want to jump into the tests. So we have the first test looks at the effect of bottlenecks. So it is subdivided into 4 different tests. So first of all, very interesting test case, actually, the position of a destination after a bottleneck. I will show you what we mean by that. Then the bottleneck length, the bottleneck width, and the influence of a congestion in front of bottlenecks. So let me go to the first test. So you can see we have a clearly defined test setup, which is nice because then we really can, the modeler, it's easy for the modeler to kind of remodel this test. So it says that we should place 150 agents on the first room. Then we have one bottleneck here of 1 meter of width and 20 centimeter of depth. And then we have a destination here. And what we should vary in this test is the distance between the destination and the bottleneck. And the question is basically which influence does the distance of the destination has on the clearance or evacuation time. And here you can see the test as I did it in crowded. So we have I had 6 different configurations. So the upmost configuration places the destination directly behind the bottleneck. Then we have different 2, 4, 6, 8 meters and 1 meter. And you can see how the people walk through the bottleneck. I always measure at the beginning of the bottleneck that we have that we compare the correct values. And you can see it already with the video. It's a little bit, unfortunately, not very fluent, that when the destination is placed directly behind the bottleneck, it's a little bit faster than the rest. So for crowded, this means since we remove our agents from our simulation as soon as they enter the destination, it has an effect on the bottleneck, which is in before, because kind of the people do not need to resort after going through the bottleneck, but they're just gone. So you see here, you can see it's the time versus the number of agents. And you can see the very dark blue dotted line is the one where there's no distance of the destination to the bottleneck. And you see that this is faster. But then for the modeler again, or for the practitioner, you can just say, okay, then it doesn't matter. If you take 1 meter or 8 meter, it's always the same throughput through a bottleneck. But I think it's a very interesting thing, because in the beginning of our projects, we didn't think of something that we need to put the destination a little bit far from, for example, an exit door, which is a bottleneck. So the second test looks at the influence of the bottleneck length, and there we reference a paper that is publicly available and which examine more or less the length of a bottleneck and the according flow rate. So here you can see, here's the length of the bottleneck, and then here you can see the flow rate. And there's different kind of work has been cited in this paper, which I show here. And what we can see, not very clearly, but well, you can see it clearly, that a small bottleneck, there's a higher flow rate than if the bottleneck is longer. And I mean, this is something which makes sense, because the longer you're in a small or in a bottleneck, the more you cannot overtake, you have to sort yourself, and that's always the slowest gives the pace. So, and this test says then basically, or we designed a test that kind of should mimic this behavior, that it qualitatively shows that the longer a bottleneck, the lower the flow rate. And since we don't know the exact values for that, this test just is designed similar to the first one. So we have again these 150 agents in the first room, and we have 2 bottlenecks of the same width. One is only 20 centimeters, like a door, and then one is 5 meters long. And actually, the objective is only show that the longer the bottleneck, the greater reduction in flow, and thus the longer the clearance time. And this is what we did. So I designed again 2 test cases. Again, we measure in the beginning of the bottleneck, and you can see it already by the video that it takes longer if the bottleneck is longer than if it's only a short bottleneck. And you can show it as a chart as well. So again, the 20 centimeter bottleneck length needs around 80 seconds, and then the long one kind of is, with 130 seconds. So, and this is totally fine. So we don't need to kind of show exact flow rates, but just to show the qualitative change of the bottleneck length and the influence. Then the third test was the influence of a congestion. This was actually already in the old RiMEA guidelines. So what do we want to test here? We have 150 agents again in the first room, and we have 2 bottlenecks now. We have 2 small bottlenecks, the first bottleneck at the end of the first room, the second bottleneck at the end of the second room. And what should be tested is that basically the congestion should form in front of the first bottleneck, but should not occur in the second bottleneck, because we already have a reduction of flow, and then it would be strange if we had the same behavior in front of this bottleneck, second bottleneck, if it's the same width. And this is what I designed here. So you see the congestion forming in front of the first bottleneck, and then you see once the people has passed through the first bottleneck, then there is no congestion in front of the second bottleneck. And again, with a chart, I just showed that I had like these measurement areas. The blue one is the first room. So this is actually the longer the time takes, the longer it takes for the people to spend time. So you see that after 80 seconds, people needed to wait 80 seconds. So we have we see the race. And here, and this is the interesting part, that here nothing happens. So even if somebody only enters the second room after 80 seconds, it still needs only around 10-15 seconds to pass this room. So we can show that no congestion occurred. And the second point was measuring the flow rate, and I did this as well. So we can see that the flow rate of the first bottleneck is a little bit higher than of the second bottleneck. As you can see, there's people queuing in front of the first bottleneck, so we have a higher flow rate, versus at the second bottleneck, there's not really a queue forming. It's just like a sorting to get the people through the bottleneck. And the last bottleneck test that we did is about the bottleneck width. So we had the length, the congestion, and the destination placement, and now the width. This is a classic. I mean, this is something where many experiments have been conducted. And again, these data are all publicly available, which we can see here. The chart is from the reference paper from Andreas Schneider and Armin Seyfried. So again, we see here the width of the bottleneck and the flow rate through the bottleneck, and we have different studies that have been referenced here. And then you kind of see, and I mean, this is kind of, we know this, that the wider the bottleneck, the higher the flow rate through the bottleneck. And the test, again, shall document that this happens, that you have like a higher throughput through the bottleneck, and that we should test it with different widths. So again, that's what I did. I have like these 3 different setups. I simulated it, and we have like these 3 different bottleneck widths. And interestingly, crowded has not these high flow rates. As you can see, the orange line shows like what the experimental data showed, and these dots you can see kind of how the model shows the results. So we have like these 80 centimeter, 1 meter, 1 meter 20, and the flow rate. But I think this is very important for somebody who uses the model. I can explain why, because we have like circular forms and not elliptic forms. And this is why then people wouldn't kind of get too kind of dense in front of the bottleneck. But from my point of view, I think it's good because it's a conservative approach. And if you use the model, then you know, okay, when you get evacuation times, you should at least, if it's really dependent on a bottleneck width, then you know that the evacuation times are a little bit overestimating and not underestimating, which I think is very important because you have so many safety and factors that you should count in when you simulate the pedestrian flows. All right. Let's have a look at the test 13, the fundamental diagram on stairs. This is very interesting because I was always saying there is no fundamental diagram on the stair, at least not the fundamental diagram as we know it in the floor or in the plane. And Alessandro did a very, very nice study. Over 1 year, he put cameras on a Dutch train station and he collected over 3 million trajectories on a stairway. And this is so valuable data, and they are publicly available, which I really thank him for. And he saw in the data that there's basically two regimes. So there's fast people, and then there's slow people. So there's two different distributions, and there's a difference between upstairs and downstairs. And you can see the plots from the paper more or less. Where you can see that here's the density versus the velocity, and you can see that there is not really this fundamental diagram as we would expect it, but it's just like a corridor that narrows down a little bit, I would say. So there is an influence on the density, but not that much influence of the density that it would be in the plane. And this is, I mean, we know that people don't want to overtake on stairs that much. They don't go diagonal on stairs. So they kind of adapt more their speed on stairs if it's a little bit crowded, and they don't try to kind of, squeeze through. And for the downstairs, you see that it's a little bit higher. So we have higher velocities, here you see a little bit more effect on that, but not that much as well. So the test actually designed was very simple again, 100 agents, one staircase, and we should measure the 1D the fundamental diagram on the stairs. And we did it for upwards and downwards, and we did it even for different tread widths to see, okay, what the effect of a tread width of a stair has, or tread depth on the flow rates. And this is how it looks. So we have basically a special locomotion model on stairs. It's called the optimal stairs model. We developed it together with Gerta Köster. And this is basically that people would tend to go straight and don't overtake. And it depends a little bit on the tread depth, how fast people would walk. And you see that we did different densities to get the different values for that. And these are the results. So again, we can see these fundamental diagrams and the kind of, the borders of the fundamental diagrams and our results. And you can see a difference between upstairs and downstairs. But again, we're a little bit more on the conservative side, I would say. So again, if I used my model, I know that we are on stairs. We do not overestimate. We are quite well in the range, but maybe a little bit to the lower end. So we are more like with the slow people than the fast people. And last but not least, I want to present the 1D fundamental diagram test, which I think is really great because what the working group did is they collected all the raw data from all publicly available experiments, which was 26 around the world, to collect and combine them into a huge data cloud. And they publish, so these data are all publicly available. You can even play around. Mosin did like a little Python script there that you really can see, and checkbox which data you're interested in. And I think this is a very, very nice data source for modelers and software developers to use this data in order to understand how the model performs with respect to the fundamental diagram. And what they did for the test is basically they extracted the percentiles, and you can see it like the 10%, the 50%, and the 90% percentile. And these are downloadable as well for the testers. So you can really use them to design your test. And I'm very thankful that it's like this because it spares a lot of time. So, and the test itself is basically the 1D, classical ring where people walk in a ring, and it's very important for the test design that agents are not allowed or that they cannot overtake other agents. And if you're not able to model this, for example, because you have a cellular automaton or whatever, and you would have like some artifacts because of the curvature, then you can do it in a very long and straight corridor and do the same and then measure the 1D flow. And yeah, I did the ring example. I put different kind of agent types with different base velocities, and then I put their different densities. And this is how we ended up with crowded. So you can see again that we can kind of nicely, model the fundamental diagram here more or less quite in the middle. But what you can see that we are not able to really reproduce these very high densities, at least not in this case, because we have in the model trust, we say our people still keep some distance if they walk behind each other, and it's not like a congested version. So you see that we only get up to 2 to 2.2 persons per square meter. All right, so this was kind of a quick overview of the new test cases, and I want to summarize basically, and I hope that that it came a little bit, or that the message was received by you, that I think validation and verification is really crucial for crowd simulation models. And without proper validation and verification, we don't know if the results are even reliable at all. And for proper validation, we really need experimental data from real-world experiments and that are reliable, so well documented, and you understand how the data have been collected. And here, please, whenever you have some data to share, would be great, because the ULI platform, data exchange platform, they have this platform where you can upload your data. It would be great to share it, because they are kind of essential for us to develop our models better and further and kind of improve them. And we see that there are guidelines and standards that kind of tackle this challenge. And I really like it, that how it evolved, and that we have more and more test cases. And I think really it's very important that if you kind of model something, if you use simulation models, you really need to put your focus on how well a model is validated and how sensitive it reacts to which input parameters, or how it kind of behaves in certain situations, as I just showed you for crowded. And as a small outlook, there was a paper presented from Alessandro, Brian, Claudio, and Mossin at the PET. They want to get even one step further. So they kind of want to have a multi-step model, testing model, so where you have different levels. So for example, that you kind of have these classical phenomena like lane formation, stop and go, fundamental diagrams, that you have different level that your model can pass. So first of all, can it even model lane formation? Second, is it the right timing when lanes form? And third, like, can you kind of distributions, can you reproduce this, or the variability of these different phenomena? And I think it's a very great idea to go there even one step further. So we will have discussions in RiMEA whether we want to incorporate this in our test case as well. And maybe just one example for the lane formation. So this is basically, I stole these slides from Mossin, but he gave them to me. So first of all, kind of for lane formation example, 2 lanes form at a moderate density. Does clogging appear at high densities? And does the motion to jam transition occur at the right density? So based on data. So this could be, for example, 3 different levels, how a test could look to, for example, test lane formation. And that's it from my side. If you're interested in the test results of RiMEA or the ISO test, as I said, these are done by a student from Enrico. Just feel free to click on the QR codes, and otherwise I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you. And I will stop. sharing my
Yes,
slides.
yes, thanks a lot, Angelika. This was really nice and informative. As every time that we run these webinars, we have the opportunity for people to provide questions or comments, and you are, of course, welcome to write them in the chat or to put your mic on. I can see a first comment in the chat from Arturo. I have a question. Is the software crowded freely available for academic and research purposes? Is more someone that wants to try out your software?
Yes, yes, it is. Just there's on our webpage, you can just say you need it for academic research and then you get it for free.
Yeah, indeed. For instance, one of my students used it
Yeah.
in the past. Great talk from Mike Kinsey. I have a question. Considering the significant level of uncertainty and people movement associated with human behavior and people movement modeling, would you say that the core limitation of validation testing is how people movement models are perceived? That is, they're often viewed as predicted tool of the future people movement scenario rather than tools that suggest a potential future scenario to identify design vulnerabilities. In this sense, isn't validation more about assessing a people movement model capability to support engineers in exploring design vulnerabilities rather than its predictive efficacy? I can summarize this. I think the point is that if you run one validation test compared to one scenario, right, that's one possible outcome of reality, right? So there is
Yeah,
an uncertainty
exactly.
also in the real world data.
Oh, totally.
So
Yeah.
what's your thought? What's your thinking on this, Angelica?
I think, yeah, a great question actually, because I think with our validation tests until now, it's kind of, we're still at the very beginning. And that's why I like the last test so much, because these are data collected over the whole world with very different kind of, situations. And then you see you have like a mean and an average, and you always are only able to kind of model the average, but we need the average and we don't know the average because we don't have that many data. So this is kind of always a little a problem, but I think we need to get forward. So yes, we have uncertainties on the situation will evolve, and you always need to kind of add some safety factors if you present your results. And I always say, basically, if you choose one model to kind of check for different design layouts and compare them to with each other, then it's nice because you do a comparative study. But if you really say, okay, my model, so according to my evacuation model, this building is emptied in 9 minutes, 36 seconds, then I say, well, no, it's not. That's wrong. I mean, it's around 10 to 15 minutes probably, and it might be faster and it might be slower, but at least you're in a ballpark around it. And I think this is where validation can help. But yeah, there are uncertainties and you can have totally different behaviors at some point.
It's a very good answer and a good comment, Angelica. If you surely know that, for instance, in ISO, in the ISO document, we had put this work on assessing uncertainty from model results that has been applied in the past also for experiments, right? Because indeed, you need to
Yeah,
understand the variability also in the experimental data that you
exactly.
have.
Yes, exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
there is one another good comment slash question from Gerta. I'm wondering whether we should move towards multi-model prediction to handle the model uncertainty that Angelica explained, like the weather people do, even if that further aggravates computational expense. So should we use more than one modeling approach at the same time?
I think this is actually quite practice in fire safety engineering. So normally one model is kind of does the simulation, and then a second model is doing the check. Like, I mean, at least in Germany it's like this. You have like one fire safety engineer, and then you have like somebody who proves everything, and then he always takes a second model to double check the values. But my problem is, and this is what I said in the beginning, that we have all these different models, but if they're all wrong, we're still wrong, you know? And so we need the validation against reality. But I think Gerda, I'm not sure what she really means, but maybe about this, does it make sense to do it on different scales, or just, for example, compare Vardare with crowded? I don't know exactly what she intends.
I mean, Gerta can, of course, comment further on this. I mean, from experience, for instance, what I teach to my students is to always sanity check the result when it's feasible, of course, because
Yeah.
sometimes it can take very long, but sanity check the results of a simulator with a quick hand calculation. So, like comparing a
Exactly.
macroscopic and a microscopic model, because it's exactly what you did in that exercise with the Pedestrian-Milinski
Yeah.
equations versus the modeling simulation. There is one
Yeah.
more comment slash question from Abdel Mutaleb. taking you back to the beginning of the presentation, you explained verification, and that is basically making sure that mathematically we are doing things right. And for validation, as far as I remember, the example of crowd dynamics was used. Now, my question is regarding validation. Since we know that individuals have a human factor, so their behavior differ, in the modeling process, do we address this on an individual scale or as a holistic concept, for example, a group scale or clusters? So looking at NIST and ISO, where they stated for the group behavior. So what are the groups that are used so far, if we have any specific? I guess it's more like, I mean, there has been a lot of discussion, for instance, how fundamental is a fundamental diagram is if you're only looking at adults rather than kids or older
Yeah,
populations.
exactly.
So how do we define the groups that we test? Uh,
Good question. So by groups, you mean kind of these different demographics, for example, or different like people with disabilities or not. I think this is very hard. And there's a really nice anecdote which I had where when I was working with Rainer Koenig and we did like a kind of some work together, and then we should simulate a school, and we had like very small children from 6 to 10, and then 11 till 14. And then we did our two models calibrated to the kind of adults. And then we get so different results for these 6 to 10-year-olds. So we realized, oh my God, we need so much more work and getting more data on these different groups of people and validate our models against this as well. Because it's not only that they are slower or smaller, but they react differently. So children are completely different in how they behave, and they walk maybe together, or they run and then they stop, they run and then they stop. And we don't even, I mean, I don't know if any model in the world is focusing on that. But yeah, as I said, there's lots of research to be done.
And I can also use this opportunity to, let's say, refer back to one of the webinars that we had about children evacuation. We had one speaker, Hannah Neimanova, that talked about, how indeed the different behaviors of children can be modeled based on experimental data. We have a lot of more questions. So we have Anas, and then I will go to Jake, that I think he wants to also make some comments. Talking about uncertainties, as a practitioner, there is always a cost that the client has to pay associated to probabilistic simulations. I can tell you that often we use deterministic simulation because the client wants to pay the minimum. How can we address this issue if we would like to offer more realistic simulation, but keeping in mind the cost aspect?
Yeah, totally. What we experience the same. And what we are doing right now is a research project. It's called Freiburg Assist. It's a German research project where we do parameterized simulations. And and actually there was a talk on the PED as well. Maybe you want to have a look. I can share the link, where we kind of find a very smart approach to kind of narrow down the number of simulations for the parameterization to only find the most relevant simulation that really need to conduct to get a full picture. And this works actually quite well. We were surprised as well a little bit. So I think, I think we need to get better ideas how to still simulate a variety of uncertainties or kind of, variations and scenarios, but at a low cost. I think this is something that we need to work on and offer our clients better solutions for the same price, because I know it's often very important or too expensive for clients to conduct such studies. Yeah.
I think Jake wants to also make a question for you, Angelika. Jake, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you well. Can you hear me?
Yes, all good.
And not so much a question as a comment. As many of you know, my work started in 1969. That's quite a bit earlier than the people on this meeting started into the field. I really want to stress that we have to be very careful. There's a lot of discussion of data, but many of the data that are discussed are really computer data. They're not empirical data based on field studies. And so I just want to stress that you should look back. You should double the span of years that you're looking back, by the way, or more than doubling it, to at least the late 1960s. And this was, again, about 11 years before there were personal computers. So there wasn't even people who could even dream about modeling on computers. But we had to work with real field data, not assumed data. And I just a general comment that I've seen this in the last few decades. I've been in the field for nearly 60 years. And there's a lot of discussion where there's a confusion between real behavior in the field and what is in computer models in terms of results. So I just
Thanks,
caution
Jake.
about
Okay,
this. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake.
Maybe I want to comment on that. So it's when I talk about data, I don't talk about any model-based data. I talk on real experiments. But there's two different of experiments. So there is kind of control experiments, and I think you know the work from Jülich and Armin, and they did so many drills and collected so many data. And what improved is the technology, how to measure the data and how to extract the trajectories out of real data from humans. And this was, I think, not possible like in the 60s. And we even refer to Weidmann, which did this great kind of collection of all the experiments around the world, and which is like the really, for us in Germany, is kind of the foundation of everything, the Weidmann fundamental diagram, because this is derived from real data. So I never talk about model produced data, never, when I talk about data. So just to make this clear for everybody, because maybe it was not clear.
Yeah, thanks, Angelika. And just to highlight, I mean, the work, for instance, from Corbetta, they have 3 million trajectories of real world data, 3 million. So not 300, not 3 million. So real world. And this kind of technology indeed was not available because they use these depth cameras, which can collect in real time, basically, you know, for months what's happening in a space. So we are really going really ahead in terms of what kind of real world data we can collect compared with many years ago. Of course, we don't talk about evacuation. We talk about circulation data, and that's a bit the difficulties because, you know, if we want to translate this information to evacuation scenarios, we always have to keep in mind that it's not as simple as equating normal movement with evacuation movement. But this is all very good. There was one last comment from Gerta that said, I would use multimodels to explore the range of possible results for situations where we have no data. Yes. So for predictions, and these models will have to pass the ISO test, of course. I don't know, Angelika, if you want to give a final comment on that.
No, totally agree.
Okay, but I think we are at 1 minute past the hour, so I think this was really an excellent presentation. I'm really glad, Angelika, that you had this talk, and it also sparked very interesting discussion and comments. So as usual, please stay tuned for our next webinar event, and I thank also everyone who attended our webinar series this time as well. And yes, so I'll see you at the next event. So please stay tuned. We will post the recordings online as well. Thanks, Angelika, and thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.